All right, welcome to our next Techniques in 2 Minutes video. This one's going to be perhaps a little long maybe very much violating the 2 minute rule because we're going to talk about dialogue and I'm going to try to cram a couple of different things into a very small space. So, what we're going to talk about here are really two main concerns. One is the uses and functions of dialogue in a piece of creative work, but then also a few things about formatting. And I'll explain why I'm honing in on formatting when we get there. But first of all, when we talk about dialogue, there's a question of like why and when should we use dialogue? And part of the problem, quote unquote, is that dialogue takes up a lot of space. To write out a conversation between characters takes up a lot of room. And so it needs to have some kind of value in more than one way. So I always like to say that dialogue, when we get an actual conversation or the direct words the characters are saying, needs to do some kind of double duty. So double duty for what? Well, there's a long list of things that dialogue can do. One is it can reveal characterization or a character's personality. We talked about in a previous video about voice and character voices. This is a great way to do that. It can also, in a similar capacity, reveal motivation or desire, the things that drive characters and the things that they want. You also, especially when we have two people who know each other, can really do some heavy lifting in revealing the dynamics of various relationships through the things that characters are saying to one another. We can also essentially move the plot forward. Are the things that characters saying moving the action of the thing we're writing forward? And everything has some kind of plot. Even a poem that is more reflective or an essay that is meditative can have a plot. And so we can use dialogue to move that forward. You can engage or complicate conflicts. So what it is the characters say to each other can be tapping into the conflicts that are existing in the story. And finally, you can have your dialogue, the things that characters say, can be touching on or exploring or expressing whatever thematic ideas it is that your piece is looking at. So having characters say things that tap into whatever it is that you're trying to have your work ruminate on. And so those are all the things that you can do with dialogue. Now, the how of dialogue. When we talk about tagging and punctuation, these are the things we're talking about. The reason that I hone in on this is that dialogue formatting is one of the very few things that you can generally objectively get right and wrong in writing. And just from a practical perspective, when you are ready to go send your work out, having dialogue that is not formatted correctly is a really easy way to get yourself self-rejected. So you don't want to self-reject just by virtue of not doing something the way it's supposed to be, just quite literally formattingly done. Now, every now and then you'll probably read or encounter a published text that does something a little different or violating one of these things. But until you are, a bestseller or a really, really established writer, I would follow these rules. So first of all, there's kind of two types of tags that I like to categorize them as. One is actual tags using say words. So he said, she said, I asked, they whispered. So whatever, the verb is the actual speech word. Then you have what I call sentences of action, and that's anything else that is the verb following or surrounding dialogue that is not simply tagging the dialogue through the verb of speech. And you'll see some examples here shortly. So when we use actual tags, we end the dialogue with a comma, and if we're not using a proper noun, the pronoun is lowercase. So I'm running late, comma, he said with lowercase h. The same is true if we use an exclamation point or a question mark. Don't go, exclamation point, still lowercase, she said. So whenever using an actual tag, it's always lowercase pronouns, commas instead of periods. You'll never have a period followed by a he said. Sentences of action instead use periods and capital letters. I'm running late, period. He rushed out of the house. So when I say a sentence of action, that's the he rushed out of the house. Don't go, exclamation point, she reached out for his arm. So those get capitalization and the proper punctuation. A few other things to think about. So that's the formatting stuff. So a few other things just to think about. Dialogue needs to sound natural. You want to write it how people actually speak, using fragments, contractions, unless a character doesn't use those. Start a fresh paragraph every time you change speakers. Keep that in mind. Again, you're going to see sometimes writers blending speech together, but again, until you're kind of established, I would do that every time. And last thing, said isn't dead. People like to talk about, you get these really wild, verbs getting used to describe speech. I am a purist, and this is partially just personal opinion, but I do think you are better off using simple verbs in dialogue tags and actual tags, like said, asked, maybe a periodic whisper or scream. But generally speaking, we don't need she interrogated, he questioned, he exhorted. You don't need those things. If your dialogue is doing its job well, readers will be able to pick up on how it's being said. Okay, that's my bit about dialogue. If you've got questions, just let me know.